Okay, it's good that we come together and study this evening. And before we begin, I try to remind those online, if you've got a prayer concern, please contact me before noon or contact the office, and we'll make sure we share those with you, with others. The other, I just want to give you the ones we do have in our church family. Nora Sarver has a hip replacement tomorrow, hopefully at noon. So prayers for her, so she'll find some relief. As well as many of us talking before we began tonight about the many COVID cases that we've got that are just touching so many people's lives in our church family and friends. So prayers for them, and prayers for who make good decisions concerning that as well. So let's pray. Gracious God, you've given us an opportunity, and that opportunity is before us now. And that's to learn, and to learn not just about your son Jesus, but to learn what it means to live like Jesus. So God, we ask that you help us to not take opportunities like these for granted. As we come together, we think about those that used to come and crave study, those that have gone and passed before us. And God, help us to remember that, we don't want to miss these opportunities. So to help us to make the most of, whether we're in person or online tonight or this coming week. God, we come lifting up others, in our world around us. We're not only in a pandemic still, but we have family members that have been suffering, friends that have been suffering, and those who have been touched by it as well in so many ways. And sadly, as we were sharing earlier, many divisive ways. And we come, at least as Christians, claiming your name. May we not be divided over this issue. May we be hearts that are filled with love. We also come thinking about Nora Sarver, who has surgery. And like I said, we just lift her up into your care, and we ask that you be with her tomorrow when she has her procedure. And so God, we're here. We ask that you give us ears to hear. Amen. Okay, we are in Luke. We're going to finish today. I pray. Now, we'll definitely finish chapter 13, and then we'll go on and hopefully get pretty far into 14. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, "Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you." He replied, "Go tell that fox, I will drive out demons and heal people today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I'll reach my goal. In any case, I must keep going today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you're not willing. Look, your house is left you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Okay, it's been 2 weeks. Jesus had again been teaching what it meant to be a follower of his. And in the midst of this, while he's teaching at that time, it says, some Pharisees come. Some Pharisees come to Jesus and said to him, "Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you." Now, the motives of the Pharisees, that's unknown. They may have been. Jesus had some Pharisees that were followers, but most of the time when we see Jesus and the Pharisees, there's contention. So we don't know. Or were they really concerned? Or for the most part, like I said, most of them didn't care, so we don't know. I'm in the camp that believes that the Pharisees were just trying to get rid of Jesus. It's like when you have an unwanted guest at your house and you're trying to, looks like it's going to snow. You might want to get on the road early. It's not calling for snow for 3 days, but you might want to get on the road early. So I think I'm in the camp thinking the Pharisees are trying to get Jesus just to move on. I don't think these are those that are in the camp of really concerned about Jesus. I think they just wanted to get him move on to another area, not as concerned about protecting Jesus. They wanted to get rid of. Now, whether what they're telling him is true or not, about Herod's plan, whether that's true or not, they're hoping it will get Jesus to be afraid and to leave. Hey, Herod wants to kill you. You need to get on the road. It's going to snow. But it is that type of picture. But this is Jesus. Remember, Jesus has been setting his path towards Jerusalem, where, that's where his destiny is. And so he tells them he's not going to run. He says, "Go tell that fox, I'll drive out demons and heal people today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I will reach my goal." So even if it was true, even if Herod had planned to kill him, his life is planned. He's been submitting to the Father's will, as he said, and not to Herod's will, which means he's going to Jerusalem. We know that's his ultimate destiny. Jesus was not going to run. So in a sense, if this is true, he says, send a message to Herod. And he calls him, tell that fox. Go tell that fox. And to call someone a fox, basically, it was seen without honor. Fox is that image of being sly. Yeah, sly as a fox, mixed with evil. When you watch some of the Disney characters, foxes are not always the ones you trust. So go tell that fox. Go tell him. If it's true, in other words, if you're in league with Herod, tell him this. I've got to go finish my work. I've got to go finish my work. And the third day, when you think about this, the third day, he would finish his work. Now, whether he meant literally, this is 3 days from now, I don't think that's the case, but we know on the third day, we know death, resurrection. On the third day, he would finish his work. Now, he could have been we're reading it, looking backwards, thinking death and resurrection 3 days. He could have meant literally, in this case, what? I've got to drive out some demons, heal some people today, and tomorrow, 3 days from now, I'll go on to Jerusalem. He could be literally giving his event, pulled up his day planner, and this is what it looked like to him. Jesus had a purpose. Jesus had a purpose, and he says, in this case, I must keep going. And tomorrow and the next day. Because his destiny, Jerusalem. His destiny is Jerusalem. He says, surely no prophet can die outside of Jerusalem. No prophet can die. He must keep going on in his ministry. Jesus knew he's going to die. He knew he's going to die in Jerusalem. But for those of us that have been in Sunday school classes in the past, or maybe those that may not be as familiar, Jerusalem, which is not just a city, Jerusalem represents the people of Israel. They had a history. And the history was rejecting God's prophets. And I gave you an example on your sheets. And guys, if you're online, you're not getting the sheets, please tell Andrew. He'll email this out to you. If you're not getting them, call and harass them between 8 and 1. But I gave you a couple of examples. I put on there like 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 10. You've got Elijah. Elijah has to go run off into the desert because he's afraid Jezebel's going to have him killed. I gave you 2 Chronicles because you got Zechariah. And Zechariah says, that your people, God, have rejected me. I've got, I gave you Jeremiah. And of course, Jeremiah is Jeremiah. and they're going to reject Jeremiah. Jeremiah was rejected so many times in the book of Jeremiah. And soon, they're going to represent another that many saw as a prophet. Jesus. And because of this, Jesus mourns. He mourns for the city of Jerusalem itself. He mourns for the people of Israel. He said, oh, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you, how often I love to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you're not willing. Jesus mourned Jerusalem. His emotional words, shows compassion, the love for the people. Even though he knew they were going to reject him, he still was going to go to the point of even death to prove love for them. He longed to shelter, protect them, but they were not willing. Instead, he rejected them. Now, as I say this, it's not in your notes, and I should have put it on there. This is one of those efforts. I think often when people think of God, they think of God as image of Father Time. I've had people at youth, that's what they see, some old man. And in the Bible, yes, the most common image of God is Father, i.e. man. But here is one of those images you see God as, personified as a female. I say that because, this is God. God's not man. God's not woman. Characteristics of both. It is God. It is God. So we see this emotion that he's got here, and he goes on. He says, but look, Drews, he's speaking to this. Look, your house is left to you desolate. Your house could refer to the city, could refer to the temple. Your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Either way, again, whether it's the house or the city of Jerusalem, or he's talking broad scale nation, either way, they're going to be rejecting the promised Messiah. And the result of their rejection is they would not get to experience Jesus. They would be desolate, as he said. They would be forsaken. Again, I don't know if I put this on the sheet. Did I put Jeremiah 12:7? Cool. Because basically, when you hear this, he said, look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he. That idea of desolate, I gave you the Jeremiah 12:7 because in it, you hear Jeremiah saying something similar when he's talking about in 6, he's talking about brothers and sister family. He's talking about the people of Israel. But he says, I will forsake my house, abandon my inheritance. Again, it could be more than just the temple. It could be Jerusalem. It could be the people of Israel. So you hear echoes of Jeremiah saying God would abandon the people because they had rejected him. And he says God will abandon, in essence, the temple because the people had rejected him. So, on a side note, as I say that, for those that think about, if we think about the image of the house being the temple that he's talking about, the Jewish people truly believe that the temple is where God dwelled. Temple was truly where they believe God was literally in the temple. So if you take this with that case, they're saying by rejecting Jesus, by their rejection of Jesus, the consequences would be that God would leave the temple and they would be separated from God. Again, the Jews understood the temple to be the dwelling place of God on earth. The city itself, Jerusalem itself was supposed to be a light into the nation. It was supposed to be the center of worship for the true God. It was supposed to be a symbol of justice for all the people of Israel themselves were to do all this. So think about all the potential, all that God had called them to do. No wonder Jesus grieved. It's like when you're a parent of a child and you see all the potential in your children and you just cast it aside. It just breaks your heart. The people, in essence, had become blind to God. They killed the prophets in the past, and now they get ready to kill Jesus. So they would remain desolate, he said, until they came to see Jesus as the Messiah. Now, that's why I said until they come to see Jesus as the Messiah, their life would be empty. Now, when you hear these words, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, that might make you think of another time when Jesus came to Jerusalem. When?
Triumphal entry.
Yeah, triumphal entry, what we call Palm Sunday. But it's that. So we see it as that. And I think it could be more than that. It looks to a future when they would, beyond that time, even when the people as a whole would see him. So yeah, you got one of those two images in one with those words. So now we go into chapter 14. Times past. How much time has passed? I don't know. I wasn't there. But we're going to read 14, 1 through 6. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees, an expert in the law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, if one of you had a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out? And they had nothing to say. So, again, what day is it? The Sabbath. And Jesus goes to a house of the Pharisee. And again, this might seem odd, because remember we just talked about some Pharisees liked, most Pharisees didn't like. But maybe this Pharisee, maybe he wasn't inviting Jesus for a trap. Maybe he wanted just to learn from Jesus, this teacher that he was. Maybe he wanted to learn more. But what makes it suspicious in that count is that others were there, and it says others were watching. the Pharisees and the scribes, the teachers of the law, they're watching. And that's not surprising either, because, we've looked at other images. And remember, a meal like this, it would have been an open courtyard mostly. It would have people on the outside looking in, people lying along the walls, just wanted to see, especially Jesus. He's pretty popular. You got Jesus in the house. People are going to want to come just to hear, see, even if they didn't agree with him. I mean, think about that. That's like politicians. I don't mean to be funny. Even if you don't like a politician, don't shout names out because this is on recording. But if there's like a politician you didn't like, my guess, if they were coming here, you'd probably go see him, most likely, because it gives you an opportunity to see that person, right? Somebody to be famous. So Jesus is famous. The other question you might be, if I were you and I was sitting here today, I told you, what day is it again? And what are they getting ready to do? Eat. So some people may think, well, Dad, Jeff, you just told us we're not supposed to work. How are they having this meal on the Sabbath? Huh? No, they couldn't either. First thing, Sabbath feasts involve no breach of the Sabbath law. And if this was a Sabbath feast, all the food would have been prepared on Friday. So all the food would have been prepared, and it would have kept warm. And believe it or not, yes, there were laws on which constituted what's really keeping warm and what's work. How much work involves in keeping something warm. Did you break the law because you kept it too warm? So you got this. And while they're at this big meal, it says what? There's a guy that's suffering from dropsy. I don't know what. I need to go back to see what New Revised says. Does it have dropsy too? Okay. Dropsy. Your footnotes may have edema, some abnormal amount of fluid. If I were visiting someone in the hospital today, I'd probably walk in and they'd probably tell my member had congestive heart failure. That would probably be one we could relate to, congestive heart failure. But either way, who wrote this book we're reading? A physician, Luke. So I like to think he's right, that this guy's got something going on, and he identified it as fluid and dropsy is what would have been the term, is how it's translated as dropsy. So life application. Dropsy, also called edema, an abnormal accumulation of the fluid in the bodily tissues cavities causing swelling. It may have been related to a heart condition. That's why you have Jeff saying, congestive heart failure, because that's similar to the symptoms. So while they're eating, there's a man with dropsy. Now, was he there by coincidence? Maybe. Was he planted? Let's see what Jesus does with the sick guy tonight. I don't know. I wasn't there. Either way, Jesus must have thought, what am I going to do? And I know the Pharisees, they're thinking, is Jesus going to break the law again? Jesus, we've already seen in Luke, we're only in chapter 14 because I'm slow, but we've seen Jesus and his disciples, break the law several times on the Sabbath. So they're wondering, is Jesus going to do this? Now, under normal circumstances, a person would say it would be perfectly all right to heal another person on the Sabbath. But like I said, remember the Pharisees had added so many laws, it came to the point it had to be the person's life was in danger. And this guy's at a dinner, so his life's probably not in danger. So the question is Jesus going to heal on the Sabbath? And so that's why he knows they're thinking it. And so he just asks the question to them. Yeah, see this guy, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? And they say nothing. They refused to answer. They didn't answer because they were hoping Jesus would heal the man, and then they could use that as an argument against him. This man has broken the law in so many ways. So we've seen Jesus heal other people on the Sabbath, but all Jesus does what? He just touches the guy. He doesn't say your sin's forgiven. He doesn't say you're healed. He says, so taking hold of the man, he healed him, sent him away. So basically all he did is touching. There's no laws against touching. But because he touched the man, he was healed. So they're thinking, Jesus worked. It would be like me going over here and touching you, Ellen, on the head, and could just pat me on the head. You'd probably say, Jeff, don't touch my head. But that's it. There's no law against touching a person. The problem was the man was healed, and that's where they questioned. So the man's healed, he's sent away, and he knows what the Pharisees are thinking. They're thinking Jesus just healed a man. And so he asked the question, if one of you had a son, let's think about it. If one of you had a child and it fell in the well, wouldn't you do something to get the kid out of the well? Most definitely, yeah. Maybe the ox, you might let him remain in there because it says if you had a son or an ox. Your son's as dumb as an ox because he fell in the well. But it says if you had a son, would you not immediately pull him out? And they know in their heart. I'm showing hands to those here. If you had a kid in the well, would you pull him out? Yeah, you'd pull him out. He knows they all would, but they refused to answer, and they didn't answer because they were hoping, like I said, Jesus would heal the man. Again, the Pharisees' rules and regulations did not ban a person from touching someone. So with it, Jesus went on to show that they'd actually done work. He touched, pulling a kid or an ox out of, just think, I don't know how much an ox, you had a bull before, didn't you?
I still have.
Bill, how much does a bull weigh? How many 100 pounds would you get? 5, 6, 7?
Yeah, about.
5.
The one we sold wasn't a big bull yet,
Mm-hmm.
and it was 500.
Okay, so I'm assuming an ox about that size. So about 500 pounds, I'm not going to be able to pull 500 pounds of an ox out of a well or a bull out. So I probably have to get all you guys to help. So that means I got to have now 5 or 6 people working to pull my thing out of the well. Truly work. My son weighs probably about 190. I probably still need one of you to help me pull it out. I probably that's why he fell in the well, but that's a different story. But yeah, they would pull. You would all pull your child up, you said. You would all pull your child, but yet they're condemning Jesus for touching a man and because he's healed. And so they say nothing. So then he's going on to teach about it. They realized that Jesus had beat him. They had no answer because they couldn't, because they knew Jesus was right. So Jesus goes on, and he doesn't just say, "Hey, I got you." He just goes on to teach, and he's noticed these people that are looking at him. He's going to use it as a teaching moment. He teaches on humility. He noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, and he told them this parable: when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you, will come and say to you, "Give this man your seat." Then, humiliated, you'll have to take the least important place. But when you're invited, take the lowest place. So that when the host comes, he'll say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you'll be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Then Jesus said to the host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and you will have been repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection by righteousness. So, again, some of your Bibles may have separated this section into the next section. Mine doesn't. Mine just keeps it flowing. We're still at the same event, still at the house of the Pharisee. Again, meals are an important social event. People are going to come. So Jesus is he's probably looking around the table, and he's looking like, who's up front? Who wanted to be? Got this big U-shaped table. Pharisees up there. Everybody wants to sit near the Pharisee. Invited it. And so that's it. Let's take what I gave from Life Application. In Jesus' day, Jewish custom at a dinner was to arrange couches in a U-shape. So get a visual. U-shape, low table in the front. Remember, they recline on the left elbow. We talked about this before. And they would be seated according to status. So, Robbie, you made eye contact, so you're the one doing this big shindig. You would be in the center. Everybody wants to sit next to Robbie. So those that want to get here because he's the most important person that he's throwing this, we all want to be next to Robbie because it means we're important. We get to rub elbows with Robbie. So, place of honor at the center of the U, and the seats would decline in status. The furthest away would be the one at least honor. So you got to picture what would happen if you arrived early and you got a space near the center. It's like you come into a room, you got there 15 minutes early, and there's nobody sitting next to Robbie. And you go sit next to Robbie. But then someone more distinguished comes. Perhaps in this case, Robbie, Dee came to sit next to you. But Karen, the wife, says, that's my husband. I'm going to sit next to him. And so you would probably feel awkward and embarrassed, and you would move away. So that's it. Imagine this. Again, imagine that I will give you an example. This is a true story. This is not my notes. This is where you should let me have caffeine for dinner. I was invited to an honor, whatever you call those things, in honor fraternity. Is that what they are in college?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited in the end of my junior year. And so I think that's pretty cool. But I transferred in. And so I'm at this thing thinking, this is great. Grades are good. And they come to me and they said, we just realized you transferred in. You're not supposed to be here.
Oh.
I just remember that. So that's how I felt. I felt good and about yay big real quick. So that's it. So Jesus said, imagine how embarrassing are you? Invited to a special event, you go right to the front and then find out you're not supposed to be sitting there. In my case, I wasn't supposed to be there. So someone more distinguished comes and you're asked to move. It's embarrassing. Your seat really is over here. In my case, your seat's outside the door, Jeff. So Jesus says, so this doesn't happen. Don't go sit next to Robbie. Go sit over here away from Robbie. And maybe Karen will say, hey, why don't you come and sit up here with us? You move from the least important seat to the most important seat. Just think about that. You go from being humiliated and moved, like you said, you would feel awkward with it. You feel like, hey, they really care about me. Come sit with us. So I think if we think it that way, it says we gain honor this way. So Jesus uses this. He uses the picture of a banquet, a wedding banquet, to give a picture of a messianic meal. Again, messianic meal is an image we see in the Old Testament as well. When Messiah would come, it's an image of a big feast, a big party. And with it, Jesus is showing how people should go and in life go to be the servant. Because by being a servant, it shows we don't overestimate our importance or worth. Do that instead of thinking you're important and being disgraced. Don't ever think too highly of yourself because there's always someone that's a little bit smarter than you, more gifted than you. But Jesus is using a meal as an example, but it's not just a meal on how to go sit next to Robbie. It's more than that. This is a teaching for life. A teaching for life is a teaching on honor. It's a teaching of humility. One of the things I like to actually do is when I get the time, if there's something at a church, I like to help clean. Because, some people, I remember when I first came here, some of the preachers not supposed to clean, but I like to clean. I like to take the trash out where I like to do those things. Because none of us are special. I've gotten in trouble before because I haven't recognized a district superintendent or a bishop. I'm thinking, well, they're really doing the job like they're supposed to. They shouldn't want to be recognized because they're just a person like the rest of us. So again, it's a teaching on humility. It's a teaching on how God is the one who decides who's honored, not the people around us. And God desires for us to model humility. And so to make sure that they got that, he gives them a second image to think about. He says to the host, he says, when you've got a luncheon, dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, your rich neighbors. If you do, they might invite you back. And you'll be repaid. Yeah, because that's true. Think about it. Karen made eye contact with me. So Karen invites me to her house. I want to say, Karen, that was a great meal. I'll take you out because I'm not going to cook at my house, because you'll starve. But usually we do those things. It's great to go to your house. I'd like to invite you to my house sometime. But he says, it's the same thing. Just because you've been invited to a meal, he says you should not assume your importance, because the host. He said the host should also consider who they're inviting to the meal. You're not just thinking, well, what can I get out of it? I'm hoping that they'll invite me over to their house. Now, Karen's not hoping to come to my house because she's definitely done with my cooking. But we should not be doing things hoping we're going to get repaid. We should not take in church money. We should not be doing it because we want to be recognized. I love when people say, I want to give a gift. I want to remain anonymous. I love those opportunities because we should not be doing it for recognition. We should be doing it to stay under the radar screen. We should, because even if that's not being repaid, recognition in a sense is being repaid. So Jesus is looking at this meal and he says, don't just invite the people that you know that you're comfortable with. Don't just invite the people that are just like you. Don't just invite the people you think that are only the ones that are deserving to be here. Think about the other people that you might want to invite. I loved, a couple years ago, it seems like eons pre-COVID, when we had the Thanksgiving meal. And, we had the people that just wandered, which I'd never met before. I liked that. That was pretty cool. Because a lot of churches have Thanksgiving meals that they just have for themselves. I'm thinking, we're going to have Thanksgiving meals for everybody else. I liked the way he did that. Because that's the glimpse of the meal that Jesus is talking about here. God so loved the world. He didn't say God so loved just the people that came on Sunday morning or that particular Sunday school class. God loved the whole world. And the question is, how do we model that out in the world around us? So again, verse 14, you'll be blessed when you do this, although they may not be repaid you. So think about those that came. If any of those got to come to that Thanksgiving meal, did we see most of them ever again? Probably not. Probably not. And many of them may have said thank you. They couldn't pay us, but they at least got a meal, and that was cool. And that's what it is. We might not get rewarded during this lifetime. Might not even get a thank you. But what we're told here is that by trusting in Jesus Christ, by living and loving like Jesus, our reward is repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. We'll be rewarded by what? Life eternal. Life eternal. Because we lived and we loved like Jesus. So 2 food illustrations, but guess what? There's a third one. And so we'll do one more. When one of those at the table heard this, he said to Jesus, blessed is the man who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God. And it would be, blessed is the one that goes to my church, because we know they're the only ones going to heaven. Because that's about what he's saying. We're going to see this in a second. Because that's about what he's saying. And we're going to see how so wrong he is in his understanding. And Jesus replied, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and was inviting many guests. At that time of the banquet, he sent a servant to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I just bought a field. I must go see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I just bought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm on my way to try them out. You got them out of the well, I guess. Please excuse me. Still another said, I just got married, so I can't come. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry, ordered the servant, go out quickly into the streets, into the alleys and the towns, and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. The servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there's still room. And then the master told his servant, go out into the roads, country lanes, make them come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of these men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. 24 is going to be the tie-in back to verse 15, but we'll come back to that. So, to make sure that they understood how the host who invites should invite other than those. Remember, we get that place of honor at the table, and only certain people were supposed to be seated at the table in the place of honor. Jesus is still using this image of a heavenly banquet. And Jesus teaches a parable. Now, it's here I have a certain banquet. I gave you hopefully in a sheet, Matthew 22, 2 through 10. Okay. And that one is called the parable of the wedding banquet. Same scenario, how it plays out. So here's the parable of a banquet. And in it, we got, like I said, similar to this Messianic banquet, that which the people hope for, where God would bless the people. But again, if I were teaching in Sunday school, who did the people believe the Messiah was only going to come for? The Jews. The Jews. So who's the banquet only going to be for? If there's going to be a big party, the Jews. They believed that the Messianic banquet was only for, they waited for the Messiah to come. The Messiah was coming only for them. So Jesus thinking this is a great teaching to remind them that the Messiah didn't just come for them. So we're still at the meal at the Pharisees' house. And so Jesus, he goes from teaching on one banquet to another banquet. And he's using this banquet he's at, teaching about the kingdom of God. And he's again turning the tables on who would be invited to the Messianic banquet. Because again, the Messianic banquet, as far as the Hebrew people thought, it was just the Jews. They believed that they were the only one at the meal. Again, blessed is the man who will eat in the feast in the kingdom of God. Blessed, in other words, is the Israelite. Blessed is the Jew who will eat the kingdom. I love William Barclay. I brought this to tell you. He says the Jews had a series of ever-recurring conventional pictures of what would happen when God broke into history, when the golden days of the new age arrived. One of these was the picture of a Messianic banquet. On that day, God would give a great feast to his own people, in which the Leviathan, the sea monster, would be part of the food. It is this banquet that the man who spoke to Jesus was thinking of. When he spoke of the happiness of those who would be the guests of the banquet, he was thinking of Jews, and Jews only. Because the average Orthodox Jew would have never dreamed that Gentiles and sinners would find a place at the feast of God. So, again, it's an uncomfortable situation. Jesus already talked about who should be at the table, and Jesus is blessed is the good Jew, because we'll be there, at this table. And so in response to this, Jesus says, I'm going to teach you something, guys. It's not just going to be you. Now, I talked about this when we studied Matthew. When there was going to be a big banquet, there was going to be two invitations. One saying, hey, there's going to be a party. Second one, it's ready. It's sort of like today. We have the save the date announcements. Save date, there's going to be a wedding in 6 months, mark the calendar, announce the event, and then in this case, you'd have it. So in this case, there's a lot of invitations going out the first time. A certain man was preparing. He invited many guests. And do we see anywhere that said any of them declined in verse 16? No. Many guests were invited. So we doesn't say, and many guests were invited, and half of them made excuses, said they couldn't, because if they got the invitation, this banquet would have assumed that they're all coming. You just ordered the food, you got the caterer to fix all the stuff. Everything's now ready to come. Banquet's prepared. Going back to those people that said they're coming, they've saved the date, but look what happens. They start making excuses. I bought a field. I must go see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on the way to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another said, I got married, so I can't come. Think about this. I love this. The first man said he bought a field and was going to see it. He allowed the claims of business to usurp the claims of God. It says it's still possible for man to be so immersed in this world and have no time to worship and no time to pray. I'm going to pause for a second. I would say, how many people bought property without going to see it? So we know this is a lame excuse, right? Second one. The second man said he bought 5 yoke of oxen, and he's going to go try them out. He let the claims of the novelty usurp the claims of Christ. He says so often, Buzz Barkley says, so often happens that when people enter into new possessions, they become so taken up with them that the claims of worship and of God get crowded out. I believe that, Got new golf clubs. I'm going to go try them out on Sunday. But I would say this. I love this one. I've got, I just got 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. I hear of this in 2022. I just got a new truck. I'm going to go see my new truck. I got to go try it. How many people going to buy a truck without driving the thing? Again, lame excuse. The third man said, I married a wife, good for you, and I cannot come. Now, I said, one of the wonderful, merciful laws of the Old Testament laid down, when a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be charged with any business. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife, whom he has taken. No doubt that very law is in the man's mind. But the flip side of it is, he'd already told the guy he was going to be at this party. Except for the wedding I just did last week. How many people get married on the spur of the moment? When you just told someone you're going to be at their party. Doesn't happen. These are not excuses. Because think about this. Think about this in the church world. If you've ever been in charge of a committee, pastor, the excuses you hear sometimes, you just shake your head. And this is Jesus, the same thing. You got to be thinking, because the excuses appear legit, But I personally think if I were to write my own commentary, I put the pretty lame. They're pretty lame excuses. I mean, rarely would a person buy a field without having seen it. It's like, I'm going to buy a house. I haven't seen it. Rarely would you buy 5 yoke. That was Dr. Seuss, yoke. 5 yoke. You wouldn't buy ox without trying them out. And then for wedding, you had several invitations. You can't use it as an excuse. But for us, we all have things that we think are more important at times than church, right? We've all got businesses or relationships, hobbies, and they may seem vital or important at that time. But whatever they are, nothing is to be more important or substitute God's invitation. That's what this parable is about. Never an excuse to serve or follow Christ. That's not an answer. We can't say, God, I can't do it because. And that's definitely not what Christ desires. But that's me going off in a whole different sermon. So back to this. The first invitation, if we're looking at this would be the Jewish people. Remember, God had called, you're going to be a light to the people. You're going to be, first invitation is the people of Israel. The people of Israel, they were called to be a light into the nation. They were to be at that banquet. Remember, the Messianic Messiah was going to come for the Jews. But, as we know, who did they reject? The Messiah, Jesus himself. So we got to think about this. This has got the layer of Jesus himself in here as well. So on learning that the invitation is snubbed, God, in this case, which is the master, is upset. I got all these blessings I want to shower out. I got the party food. It's there. I've spent bukus of money on it. And now I have nothing to share. I've called them to serve and to be with me, and they give me excuse after excuse after excuse on why they can't do. I've told you before, and I always pick on this. I've had I just did year-end reports. Robbie helped me with section 2 and 3, so I'll find out the numbers. At the end of 2020, when we had 405 members. Yeah, 405 members. And I understand because many don't feel comfortable coming back right now. I truly understand. So I figure the active people, those who are online, in person, what would you guess? 120, 130. It's what we had before COVID. But I've never had people, when they come to the baptismal vials, say, I'm okay with giving, but I'm not going to serve. Or I'm okay with serving, but I'm not going to give. Everybody always tells me yes. I've never had anybody stop me in the middle of joining church and say, I like 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5. Just like the people here with the party invitation. Everybody says, yes, we're going to be at the party. Ask the baptismal vows when you join church. We do these things. Everybody says, yes. Baptize the baby. Will you raise this child in the church? Yes, they say. Do I see him again? Often no. The invitation is still there, and yet people, they have excuses. But luckily, God doesn't give up on us. We have a God that's still sending out invitations, still reaching out love, wants all to come to the banquet. And he says, okay, maybe these people will reject the invitation, but I'm still going to offer it to others. And I love the people he picks. You know, in this case, we have people that are poor, crippled, and blind, and lame. And again, do you remember, if I'm blind in first century, wouldn't that be thought of as a sin? You know, who sinned, you or your parent? Jesus is saying, go to the rejected. You know, those the world has rejected, invite them in. So at this important party, you know, Jesus, now they would have never thought inviting, you know, poor people. They never would have thought about inviting lame people or blind people. That would have never been shocking, you know, to do that, because they're sinners. But Jesus says, no, invite them to come. Invite the sinners. And that's what Jesus did. You know, he was always hanging with the sinners. He was always with the outcast, because he'd come for God sent his son into the world. And so he says, invite them to come. He says, make them come. You know, he's not saying force them to come. You know, I have done this. The master says, go tell them in the lanes, make them come. He's not forced. God doesn't make anyone come into a relationship. But he wants us as his people to encourage them to come. You know, don't take no for an answer. Never give up on someone just because they haven't accepted Jesus now. Never give up on them. So, and with that said, I could go off on another rabbit trail. It's like Jesus never gave up. You know, remember, prophet after prophet after prophet had rejected Israel, yet Jesus is here again. I send the Son to see if they will accept the message of good news. Again, I tell you, not one of these men, remember again, the people of Israel we're going to reject, will get invited to taste my banquet. But Luke, who's writing to a Gentile world, they're going to get to taste the banquet. Last part from life application. In Israel's history, God's first invitation came from Moses and the prophets. The second came from his son. Jesus' listeners, the religious leaders, accepted the first invitation. You know, they heard Moses, we're going to be God's people. They believed God had called them to be his people. Again, blessed is the man, blessed is the Jew who eats at the feast. They believed God had called them to be his people, but they insulted God by refusing to accept the Son. They would miss the banquet completely because they refused to accept God's invitation. They would not get the smallest taste of what had been prepared for them. There would be no second or third chance because they would reject. Thus, just as the master of the story sent his servant into the streets to invite the needy to his banquet, so God was sending his son to the whole world of needy people, Jews and Gentiles, to tell them the kingdom had arrived, so get ready. For us, as we close out tonight, the good news is he still comes for each of us. He still loves each of us. He still wants us to respond. He still wants us to come to the banquet. Our mini banquets are in worship, times of study, but then he wants us to go from the banquet and be hands and feet of Jesus in the world around us. So we shall pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So we'll finish 14 next week and move into 15 this week. We just got a chapter in a sense of tonight. Have a good night. See you next week. All right.